Welcome back to the Hoop Bar. This is season 2, episode 30. I'm your host, Matt, here today with Rahul and the Gons. We just opened up our YouTube page, youtube.com/the Hoop Bar, where we're going to be posting the video version of this podcast, some clips from the podcast, and some of these short little blurbs quick shots that Rahul and the Gons have been posting, as well as the Gons guide. Those will be posted on the Instagram stories and hopefully YouTube shorts as well. How has your week been, Rahul?
Week's been good. Can't complain. Short week because of Memorial Day. Shout out to the veterans and everybody who sacrifices going away from their families. But yeah, week's been good. No smooth sailing so far at work. It's about to get busy first of the month. Other than that, good except for the Lakers stuff.
The Gons, how's your week been?
It has been fantastic after watching some really good basketball and some really bad basketball yesterday. I'm going to Hawaii on Friday, so I'm 2 days away from being on a beach surrounded by nothing but blue water. Very excited.
Hawaii does sound amazing right now with summer coming up. But like you said, there was some good basketball. There was some bad basketball. Let's first start with the good basketball. Last night, Nuggets-Blazers, the game of the playoffs. The Nuggets prevailed in second overtime, 147-140. When Dame time, Damian Lillard had 55 points on 24 shots. That means he missed 7 shots only. He was 12 of 17 from three-point land. He had 6 rebounds and 10 assists with only 1 turnover, with a steal and 3 blocks. Unfortunately, his supporting cast didn't really support him very much during the two overtime periods, as they only scored 2 points, while Dame ended up scoring 19 points by himself. The Joker, the MVP of the regular season, or will most likely be MVP of the regular season, matched Dame time with the 38, 11 rebounds and 9 assists. So really good games from the two best players on each of those teams. I still think it's going to go 7. So let's start with the Gons. What were your thoughts on that game last night?
I hope you give some flowers to Monte Morris because he balled out of his mind. 28 points yesterday. No one thought he would do that. Everyone thought it was a game of twos, right? You got 2 stars, you got CJ, and you got Dame versus Joker, and we had doubts about Michael Porter Jr., but Michael Porter Jr. balled out with 26. Aaron Gordon did what Aaron Gordon is going to do. 14 points. That's what you anticipate from him. Austin Rivers with 18 points. Where did that come from? He's helping relieve, some of that missing factor that Jamal Murray brings. On the other end, it was almost like you were watching identical to the Laker game, except, there was effort. The Blazers were playing hard, even though they weren't scoring on all ends. And Dame took over with over a 50-piece. But McCollum can't shoot 7 for 22 and have 18 points. They're not going to win with those numbers. I think Nurkic had, 14, if I'm correct. Covington did okay at 19. The biggest issue is the Portland played really hard. It was a great game. We saw why Dame Lillard is Dame Lillard. But he just needs help, and you can't let Monte Morris have 28 points.
Yeah, Monte Morris did pull a Jamal Murray imitation there for sure. I will give flowers to Monte Morris. Good job, Monte Morris. Rahul, what were your thoughts of the game yesterday?
I don't understand what it takes for Nurkic to stay on the floor. He's fouled out 3 of the 5 games in this series. So it makes a difference is having a body out there. Kanter's not getting enough minutes. He got 14 minutes. So Kanter should be getting more minutes if Nurkic is not out on the floor. And I think Stotts wants to keep Covington in there because he's more of a threat offensively. But to me, I think that you need to have a body on Joker. And Nurkic does that. But you shouldn't be the body you use to foul out because he does so much more for you. So if the body you use to foul out, it has to be Kanter then. And then you can play Nurkic a little bit more late in the game. So if that's what needs to happen, and that's what Stotts needs to do is that, hey, okay, I'm going to limit his minutes early on. So make sure that he's available to help Dame, to help McCollum late, because there's a lot of offense that can be created with his skill set. He can shoot. He's a big, and he can pass. He has good vision. So I just think that's still a key, as I mentioned, and he fouled out again. And other than that, it's scary. The Nuggets have found all these guys that are contributing We know the Nuggets have been deep in the past years. We talked about their depth, but with Murray out and Will Barton out, they're still finding guys. Monte Morris is getting minutes, like Mitch, you said, the Gons. He did great. Aaron Gordon. You don't never know what you're getting. He's been on the Magic for so long. You don't know what you were going to get, and here he is in the playoffs. I don't even know if it was his first time in the playoffs, but he's shining, right? He's not afraid of the moment. 10 rebounds. Joker had 11 rebounds. Michael Porter Jr. We're talking about Kuzma. Can Kuzma step up to this level? Because MPJ is doing it. And so now all of a sudden, I just think that the depth isn't as much of an advantage, especially if guys can't stay on the floor. I agree with you. Game 7. And in a Game 7, you have that killer, that Dame time. That's why I give them a fighting chance still if it goes to Game 7. If they can get it to 7 and they're at home, then one team has Dame Lillard, the other team doesn't.
Let me pose a question for you. Why aren't we seeing that with the Lakers? They have players that can ball out like that too. Is it the coaching? I know you've been praising Vogel all year on defense, but do you think there's some weaknesses in his offense? And maybe he emphasizes defense too much. Maybe that's why he's not playing certain players. Well, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we could. So I agree with you. We've been praising him nonstop on defense, and rightfully so. Again, going back to all those guys have been injured, and the team was still 1 or 2 on defense. Lately, they're not showing that. But is his offensive schemes limited? I think so. I mean, look, we're asking him. We're sitting here and watching this and saying Gasol is a playmaker. Without Schroeder being Schroeder and LeBron, if he isn't 100% or if he's the only one making plays, I know that sounds weird, and Matt, you've said it before, but Gasol makes plays not by dribbling and getting to the lane, but he makes plays because he reads defenses and he's able to make passes. He should be on the floor. Is Drummond really been that much of a help to you in stopping Ayton? I don't think so. And I like Drummond. Trez, much quicker, agile. Guys like they have on their side with Bridges and Crowder, those guys match up well against a slower big, but they don't match up as well against somebody like Trez. So yes, you're right, the Gons. I think that Vogel needs to figure out, and either Jason Kidd or Vogel, somebody needs to figure out that how come we have all this talent, even with AD out, and you're not able to find something to get our offense to flow better, to look better. I mean, you have all this talent. I think arguably the second most talented team, if maybe the third or second, and you can't figure out how to score. Like Matt's mentioned before, 24th ranked offense because of your in and out of lineups and you're injured. I get it, but this is it. You don't have any more time. You better. If all the chips are on the table and you're thinking I have LeBron James and let's say hopefully you have Anthony Davis, and if somebody gives you those two guys and all these shooters, you better come up with a great offensive scheme as well as you're coming up with great defensive schemes. So yeah, I think it does fall on the coach.
I think the Lakers were depending on, at least the Laker players, from what I gathered, well, even my predictions before the game started. This will be a vintage LeBron game. Game 1, NBA Finals against the Warriors. Game 7 or that Game 6 against Detroit. One of those vintage LeBron. He'll do it by himself. He'll win it by himself. And that's what I believe the Lakers thought too. Like, okay, he's going to take over. He's going to do this. And they didn't show up. Dennis Schroeder wants $20 million. You can't go scoreless in a game like that. He's the one that's going to have to step up immensely, offensively and defensively. When it comes to Vogel, right, that was your initial question, Gons. He's predicated on the defensive end, and it worked last year. As far as offense goes, it's really, when it comes down to it, you have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Give it to them, get out of the way. You really just have to hit your outside shots. And have the Lakers have not been hitting their outside shots. They've been getting open corner threes, and they've converted 20%. So does that fall on LeBron? Does that fall on Vogel? The corner three right now, it's like a layup for almost any other team. If you look at that Portland versus Denver series, they're hitting open threes. The Lakers are just not hitting open threes. We got Ben McLemore. He missed his open threes. Schroeder's just completely just can't hit threes at all. And then you have someone like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's coming off an injury. There's no confidence there. He's predicated on a lot of confidence. So when it comes to our offense, it's predicated on our defense to get out in transition, and then once you get in the half court, have LeBron or AD cook. There's no like run UCLA sets to run these different cuts. It's always a pick and roll, find someone in the corner for three. If the Lakers hit their open threes, they can win. It's just that they didn't have the confidence hitting it, and they were depending on LeBron way too much last night.
Yeah, and 30% shooting from three this series. 30%. That's not anywhere close to what they do in their average season. So everybody is in a slump at the same time.
Yeah.
So or we just got a bunch of players who can't step up in the playoffs, at least for the Lakers.
It's weird because I hate to harpen back on last year's team, but wouldn't we rather have Rondo over Schroeder right now? That's what sucks. Exactly, 100%. Right?
Like, he's like a plus 24 when he's on the floor playing for the Clippers.
Exactly. So it's just plus you sacrificed, having a potential point guard in Schroeder by sacrificing Danny Green. Yes, Danny Green couldn't hit his threes, and now he's hitting his threes randomly in Philadelphia. But he was also a great defensive cog. Imagine if he was out there instead of Schroeder. Would Booker or Bridges or Campaign be any different with him in the backcourt as well? Maybe even Avery Bradley. So it's just you want to harken back to last year's team. Oh, yeah, Dwight, but you have to know that this is the team we have to depend on. If they lose tomorrow, if they lose game 6, then we go back to the drawing board.
I mean, the one thing you guys got to look at, like when we were talking about this team, okay, the Gons, you called me when we talked to each other video. We did a shot. Don't you remember? We did a shot when Montrezl Harrell chose the Los Angeles Lakers. Who expected that, right? It was like, oh my God, we just got the 6th man of the year, or potentially the 6th man, right? Was he the 6th man, right? Did he beat Lou Williams out? And we just got him on the Lakers from the rivals for cheap. And then things kept coming in. Okay, we got Marc Gasol. Okay, he doesn't replace Dwight, but he gives us a guy who stretches the floor. Oh, we got Drummond in the middle of the season. The guy is a 2010 guy. Okay, he's not panning out. He's still playing decent. We got Schroeder. Like, we haven't had a point guard with that speed since Nick Van Exel. We got Schroeder. Like, on paper, Wesley Matthews and THT stepped up a little bit during the season. We saw, hey, maybe he's going to contribute. He contributed more than Schroeder last game. I think he had 11 points. McLemore, I mean, on paper, this team is supposed to be better. So I want to know if we can harp on last year, this and that. But then was last year more about the team just being really smart, guys like Rondo on the floor with LeBron? Or was it about the coach? Because it sounds like, how are you not able to do something with this lineup offensively where we're struggling every single game now to put up points? How you can't expect your defense, as good as it is, to hold for 4 quarters. It's just like a great pitching team, right? In baseball, if you keep pitching a no-hitter, but no one's supporting you on the runs, eventually you're going to end up losing more than winning. And so the Lakers have this great defense, but their offense is nothing. 0, and you have all this talent. To me, that's a coaching.
So, Gons, we saw Snoop Dogg and other Laker fans call for Frank Vogel's job yesterday. Are you in that camp? You initially asked a question, Vogel's coaching issues. Do you think the Lakers need to find another coach in the offseason?
No, I'm 100% against that, because that's all they do. Like, let a coach stay. He won the chip, but I want you guys to remember, we were doing this podcast last year, and we had the same criticisms of why he wasn't playing Dwight Howard and why he wasn't playing this person. Me and Rahul, we were chatting it up. We were all in the chat, and why is he not doing why and that? They were good enough to still win at that point with making some questionable decisions. Here we are a year later. Now you're hurt a couple players. You've had some roster changes, and you still seem to be making decisions that are questionable. So I don't know if he should be fired. I don't think he should be fired alone for this season, even though he won last season. But I think maybe you bring in an assistant coach who can help run the offense to be successful and keep him as a head coach. I think that would be the ultimate scheme, because he has the best defense in the NBA. You're not going to get that with every other coach. He's a defensive specialist, which is great, which is Tom Thibodeau. Same thing. Having trouble with offense, though, against the Hawks, right? Offense isn't his thing. You need a combination of both.
And that's what the Suns have. That was the one fear that of all the teams the Lakers will have to face in the playoffs, Western Conference, at least, the Suns were ranked in top categories in both defense and offense. I think we missed an opportunity there in Game 1 when CP3 got hobbled, and we could have taken that game. And now things are looking tough. We'll see.
Yes, the Lakers are going through some hardships. It's just funny how in one game before our podcast, I believe it was last Friday, the Lakers were riding a high. They're gonna beat them in 5 games. The Clippers were down 0-2, and they're gonna get swept. And now look at the NBA, the NBA landscape. The Clippers are most likely gonna win that series because Luka Doncic is hobbled. His back is really hurt, and I think his back is hurt because he had to carry the Mavericks so much those last 4 games. So we're going to hit a few series that are still in the middle of it. Let's just start with the Clippers. Let's start with you, Rahul. Do the Mavericks have a shot to win the series?
Like you said, it depends on Luka's health. I don't see what's changed other than what the Clippers are doing and being more aggressive. They're not changed in the way they're defending Luka in any way, right? We'll get to the series with the Nuggets and Blazers. I see the Nuggets actually making changes in the way they defend Dame Lillard, which is maybe to deny the ball. I didn't really see that out of the Clippers. All they're doing is changing what they're doing on the offensive end and what they're doing with Kawhi and Paul George and being more aggressive in the paint. But they're not really defending Luka well. It's going to come down to his injury. If he is 100%, which it doesn't look like he's going to be, then he can find a way to get everybody involved to win a game and win 2 games. But if he's not 100%, I don't see how they are going to be able to. And remember I said this, we should be talking about how are the Dallas Mavericks going to stop Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? And that was when they were down 0-2. I'm like, why are we sitting here talking about Luka? How come the Clippers haven't stepped up that the Mavericks have to figure out how to stop those 2 guys? Well, that's finally happened. And now with Luka's injury, the tides have completely turned. I don't see how the Mavs can pull this out. I think the Clippers are locked in now.
Gons, is this a wrap for the Clippers, or do the Mavericks have a chance?
So the Mavericks still have a chance. It just depends on Luka's injury. It was something with his neck where he couldn't even turn his head. If that's the case, it's over. They're so heavily dependent on Luka that the Clippers just have too much manpower to win. So if that's the case, yes, Clippers are going to win easily. If it was just a thing where you needed an adjustment with a chiropractor, this is still anybody's series. So it just depends on Luka. Like, that's how much he changes the series. If he's partially healthy, he's still got a chance to win. If he's what he was the other day, then no, Clippers got this in the bag, and lucky for them because they could have easily lost the series.
So we're recording this on a Wednesday. We have some games starting up soon. We'll just kind of go over these quickly because this will be posted after. The Wizards and Sixers series, it took a turn because we thought the Sixers were going to just roll over the Wizards 4-0, but Joel Embiid is now hurt. I imagine they're going to win one of these next 2 games, and then to face most likely the Hawks or Knicks, or most likely the Hawks in the next round. I guess we'll start off with you, Gons. Do the Knicks or the Wizards have a shot at coming back in their series?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that Embiid is out today. I think the Wizards are going to win. I think it's going to be 3-2. And then at that point, that's anyone's series. Because if Embiid does come back, obviously for him to miss a game and another game, he's not going to come back 100% healthy. And that leaves the door open for the Wizards. If they get back to how they're playing at the end of the season, yes, they're in it. The Knicks, they're playing in Madison Square Garden. They're down 3-1, but they're going to win today. It's going to be 3-2, and then anyone can win 2 games. So both teams still have a shot.
Rahul, what are your thoughts?
I think that the Wizards still have a shot because of the injury. You call it a light meniscus tear. MCL, right? It's a light tear. That's still a tear. It's still a tear in your knee, and he's a big guy. And so I think that internally, I'm sure they're worried about this injury. And the last thing they want to do is rush him back, potentially impacting the later rounds. So you might not see him for game 5 and game 6. I think that's why the Wizards have a chance, like the Gon said. I think that without Embiid, they started off really well. Yes, we talked about in the regular season they were able to they were able to keep their rank at 1 or 2 in terms of the standings in the Eastern Conference, but eventually without Embiid, they played 21 games and ended up 10-11. So yes, Harris stepped up. Yes, they were able to keep afloat, but it was the Eastern Conference. BKN, Brooklyn struggled during that time span as well because Harden was out for 5 weeks. So they were able to maintain their standing, but they were 500. And so I see that how Westbrook can steal another game, and then I think this is a 2-game absence. I do not think that he's coming back from a small meniscus tear. You guys, I mean, are you hearing the same words I am? Because to me, that sounds like that could lead to something more, and why would they risk that? I think they're coming back. The Knicks, same problem as the Lakers. There's no offense. What happened to Julius Randle? He averaged nearly 40 points a game, and so against the Hawks in the regular season, and now you can't do anything. RJ Barrett can't do anything. So where's the Knicks offense going to come from? Are we going to see Derrick Rose return to MVP status from the Bulls and take over these games? He started, but he's not going to be able to do that. That's like asking LeBron to do that. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, because of the lack of offense that's being produced and the way they're scheming against Randall, I don't see how the Knicks can come back and win. What is it? The next 3 in a row. I can't see them winning 3 in a row with Trae Young and all of that talent, Bogdanovich and Capella and Hunter, so many Huerter. I mean, there's so many guys on that team. I wish it was the other way. I was hoping that the defense would win out, but it looks like so far the offense is winning out. So that bodes well for the Nets.
Yeah, Randall didn't know how to respond to teams game planning for him for a playoff series. So Nate McMillan does have experience in the playoffs. Was able to guide his team to being up 3-1 against the Knicks. And I believe my belief is that the Sixers and Hawks will win their games today. That'll be a very good series. But that also, our next pod, we're going to preview that Nets versus Bucks series. And that might be just the Eastern Conference Finals right there, especially if the Sixers are hobbled and the Hawks are still kind of young and don't measure up to those teams. So before we end our podcast today, I wanted to talk about Danny Ainge stepping down from the Boston Celtics front office and Brad Stevens going up to take his spot in the front office in Boston. So let's start off with Rahul. What are your thoughts on Ainge stepping down and Brad Stevens going up?
I saw a meme. This is funny. I saw a meme and it said that Ainge traded away Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry for a bunch of draft picks to the Nets. And that was like he fleeced the Nets because those guys were up there in age. They were just about out of the league, and he got all these draft picks, and I'm sure he turned them into great things. I'm sure one of them probably, I don't know for sure, but might have been Tatum. But now you have the Nets taking you out from that many years later, whatever it was. That's kind of pathetic. And you didn't win a champ. Did they get one? No, they didn't get a championship after that, right? So that's kind of sad. So I did think that he probably was in a mutual agreement. Like he probably didn't want to go, but he was like told that, hey, we want to make a change. And Danny Ainge said, okay, I'll step down. Brad Stevens, I don't know how he is as a GM, but I will say this. If a player who knows the players that played for him, that are on the roster, a coach knows that more than anybody else, even more than the GM who's got those players there. So if he's going from coach to GM, I'm sure there's insights that are going to be valuable for him in one, hiring a coach, because he knows the personalities of his players. He knows where they like to shoot, what he likes. He's a smart guy. So I could see him being very picky about the coach he hires, which is good. And from a GM perspective, knowing all of that about your players, it bodes well for when you're trying to make trades and sign players, other players that fit well with your existing roster. So I think it's a good move for the Celtics to take that guy and move him up and bring in a new coach. FTC, but I think Danny Ainge's time had kind of just run out.
Gone. So what are your thoughts on this Ainge Stevens Boston situation?
Danny Ainge didn't want to leave. He's only 62. He's only worth $10 million, and that's not a lot of money today. He's had plenty of picks, like Rahul said, and he hasn't amounted to much, but they're in the playoffs, right? So I do think he'll land somewhere else. Do I think that Brad Stevens was the best fit? I don't know. I heard Brad Stevens have gotten into altercations with like Marcus Smart, but who wouldn't with Marcus Smart, right? He seems like he's a very emotional guy, and to be able to handle that kind of player makes you a special coach. So I'm going to go with a yes. I think it was a great move. I think Brad Stevens has had a lot of exposure coaching, and it's going to only help get meetings and attract other players to come play for the Boston Celtics. So it's always an advantage when you have a coach that's liked to reach out to other players to try to get him to play on his team. I think more teams should do this approach of having a coach go into a GM because you know that he's well respected and has a relationship with players, and other players could vouch for him. So, yeah, good move.
Yeah, and that's a great point because Danny Ainge is probably not as liked as we might think, or other because first of all, he's a former Celtic, right? And those days, and so there's a lot of players out there that might feel a certain way about Danny Ainge that will not about Brad Stevens. So that's a great point too. And I missed my other point that I was going to make. Oh yeah, I agree. I like the idea of GM or coach, or maybe one moving up or down. I never liked the idea of one doing both, and that was Doc Rivers. And you see how that turned out, right? When he was trying to do both, and he was giving his son preferential treatment because he was the GM, but also the coach.
Yeah, those coach GM combinations, yeah, that really doesn't work. You can go back to, like you mentioned, Doc Rivers, Tom Thibodeau in Minnesota. Yeah, so there has to be a separation there. So before I had one surprise topic. I think I mentioned this in the chat as well. You have Alex Rodriguez, old A-Rod from the old Seattle Mariners, New York Yankees baseball, buying the Minnesota Timberwolves and potentially moving them over to Seattle. The Gons, what are your thoughts on the Timberwolves potentially moving to Seattle, and I would guess become the Sonics?
I think it's a great move for the NBA. The NBA is a very progressive league compared to other leagues. All about freedom, rights. Seeing what's happened in Minnesota, I'm not saying we should punish them by taking away their team, but obviously, maybe the people that are there, maybe there's too much. I don't know, too much of conflicts going on. They got their own issues to work out with the police. And Seattle is just a great city to be in. It'd be better for the players. It wouldn't be as cold. Fans from Vancouver, it'd be great globally because you don't have the Vancouver Grizzlies anymore. So they can just drive, 30, 40 minutes across to Seattle to watch NBA games. Like, it's a win-win. No doubt Minnesota should be gone to Seattle.
Rahul, what are your thoughts about Minnesota potentially moving to Seattle?
I think Seattle, anytime Seattle is in the name for a team, we're all excited because I just want to buy a Sonics jersey. Who doesn't? And I think the Sonics are a better city. Seattle is a better city. I agree with the Gons. It's Kevin Garnett from Minnesota versus Alex Rodriguez potentially moving them up there. I don't know why Kevin Garnett so badly wants to keep Minnesota or the Timberwolves in Minnesota. Didn't he have like a fallout with the owner? I thought he did. So I'm a little bit surprised at him speaking up first for the Celtics and now for the Timberwolves or something to that effect. So I like the move as well. The NBA needs Seattle to have a team. The NBA would look great if Vegas had a team as well. And Minnesota, I mean, I agree. I've never been to Minnesota. I know a couple people that I work with from Minnesota, really cold place. I can't imagine they'll miss them too much. They still have the Twins. Oh, and the Vikings.
That will be it for us today. The next time we'll be potting, the Gons will be sipping on some coconut pineapple pina colada in Hawaii. Unfortunately, now, if you're looking at this on YouTube, Rahul is now in Hawaii.
So I just got there right now.
That's great to see. So we'll be covering the games and series that are over by Thursday. We'll be covering them on Friday. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate all of the support within YouTube and the more Instagrams posts that we're doing now. We hope you guys have a great rest of the week. We'll see you this weekend, and the Hoop Bar is closed.